Brooke Howard-Smith, welcome
Hey.
to Between Two Beers.
Wow, this is special, y'all. This is great.
We're super excited to have you in here. There's no way you remember this, but we used to hang out a little bit in your poker era.
Wait a second.
Queenstown,
Wow,
2010. I was part of a group of professional poker players that lived in Queenstown.
Oh,
and
yeah.
you were on your sort of pub Texas Hold'em poker tours going
Yes.
around. And we overlapped for a week or two there. There's no way you remember me, but you might remember Puggy 82 and Mormon and
I know. I
Beach.
totally remember that. Obviously, those are poker NZ days. That's when poker was like had taken off. It was crazy, and we did a full road trip in New Zealand. It was awesome. And then the Panorama crew. Do you know those guys at Queenstown crew?
1 month, 1 million, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff there.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Good poker players in Queenstown.
Yeah, they were. That was so you were trying to get that going in pubs around the country? Do you remember
I
what your
was
vibe
building. No, I had a website, and we were trying to build kind of a poker community. So I really enjoy poker. It's been like a huge, huge part of my life over the last 25 years. You wouldn't know it from how shit I still am. It's amazing. It kind of did this. It kind of plateaued, and now I'm probably going downhill in terms of my skill. Yeah. But there was just a period where I just kind of jumped on that poker bandwagon.
One of the guys we lived with, if you're interested in poker at the start of this episode, go and listen to our
We've lost a lot of people.
So you have been described to us by a friend of the show, Jay Reeve, as the most connected man in New Zealand. How do you feel about that title?
Well, it could be a euphemism, right? I don't know. Now, Jay is amazing, and he's that's one of his superpowers. He's always pumping up the people around him, and clearly he's the most connected man in New Zealand.
He said you would say that. Yeah. But example of it today, you've breezed in here and straight away recognized, connected. That's kind of your position, it seems, from the outside looking in, as a connector of people. Yeah,
heaps of today we're going to talk about ADHD, right? We're going to talk about how, I'm self-diagnosed. I've done a survey that puts me in a kind of like comfortable range and allows for me to just lose focus on things and start something new, and therefore meet a whole bunch of new people, kind of network with them. And then if you do that for like 20, 30 years, eventually it's just the same people, isn't it? You're just like, oh, hey, yeah, you're done. Play a game of poker. We could definitely play a couple of hands.
Maybe
afterwards
we do a little heads up.
This, heads up.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's do that.
All right, it's a dangerous game. You open a door and a dangerous man here. Hamel hole. Is that right?
Hammy hole.
Hammy hole. There you go.
My next question relates into this because we had you booked in for a few days ago, but it was double crossed with a hospice speaking gig.
Double crossed?
Double
booked. But what do you do to manage your busy weeks? You have a sort of an online diary?
Yeah, I do. And about 2 years ago, when I kind of really burnt out, 2022, I really burnt out. I just had too much on. I started telling each of the different things I was doing that I was going to focus 100% on the other one until they all just cancelled the meetings. And so I built out this plan. I was like, when I've got 2 weeks with no meetings, then I can start to kind of like get my life back in order. So nowadays, obviously, it's getting back to stupidity where I'm supposed to come into this, been looking forward to it. And the day before, I get this email saying, looking forward to you doing a 30-minute keynote tomorrow that I had not planned for at all.
Do you use tool, like we've got a shared time tree now, which has also involved Stephen's wife and my partner, just so we can
time tree.
Yeah,
is that a software or a term?
It's an app. It's a software. And it's helped us. It's helped us a little bit.
It's been great.
Although this wasn't in here today, I noticed, so I didn't know we were doing this.
Yeah, I think obviously, and we'll talk about technology later, but I'm a huge advocate for understanding how technology can make things easier. So. And I use a fair whack of AI in my life these days. And calendars are pretty straightforward, right? Sense of like helping it plan your week. Yeah.
Okay. So this part is called Meet Brooke. And as we spoke about before we recorded, we've spent the last week like getting into your story. And when I met Jay a few weeks ago, he said, you need to get Brooke Howard-Smith on the show. His life was made for a long form podcast. And there's so much going on here. So I'm going to give you a few headlines. So in the last 30 years, you've built 15 companies around the world. Here are some of the more recent ones. So the co-founder of Create APAC, the co-founder of the Futurist Foundation, founder of Non-Fungible Labs / Fluff World, CEO and founder of Otterfish, and founder of We Are Tenzing.
Yeah.
So that's just current. That's just sort of the most recent.
Those are the ones that are going at the moment.
At the moment. Okay.
Spinning plates, right?
So I called Amber, your wife, and had a great chat with her. And I asked her for some insights into what Brooke's world looks like. And I'm going to read you what she said.
Okay.
She said, Brooke is an energizer guy, but he's also self-winding. You wind him up, point him in a direction, and he'll just go. He's always on the fine edge of either hiding or sleeping. He's always ready for a nap, but he'll just do these little micro naps and he's off again. But he's a very kind, funny, gentle soul and very smart. Sometimes I'm like, where the fuck did you learn that? It's like, does he listen to the History Channel when he's sleeping? I just don't get it. He's got a real thirst for knowledge. I call him the Business Olympics because I work largely from home, and these days he kind of does too. But I can't get anything done because what he's doing is so interesting. My ears are flapping. Within 40 minutes, he's onto something completely different. He'll wake up and he'll be like, I'm hosting a bloody podcast about wearable NFTs. Then he'll be in a board meeting for We Are Tenzing. Then he'll be on the AM show to talk about the latest and greatest or AI. He's an energizer bunny. He just kind of goes. At the moment, he's pulling together CreatorCon, which is an event that he invented last year, the second year running. It's become this bloody ginormous thing, and it's just so bloody Brooke.
Yeah, so, by accident as well. It's almost always by accident.
So my question at the end of that is, like, what does a week look like in the current life of Brooke Howard-Smith?
There are a lot of different modes, right? So there's some things that I'm really hands-on with and some things where it's like a board and you just kind of, so it does move. And if you're on the outside, it would seem a little bit crazy. You could imagine that. With almost all of these things, I'm surrounded by so many clever people and so many talented people. And if you have an idea, you know, we all have those, you know, drunk conversations on the Raz a little bit later and people are like, we should do this. Sometimes I'm stupid enough to do it. Like, so, and then I'll tell people I'm doing it. So like CreatorCon, I said, we should do this. No one else thought it was a good idea. I said, I'm going to do it. I booked a venue and then you're kind of stuck, right? And so what my poor wife has to deal with is I have like, I was going to say low level, mid-level anxiety where if I say I'm going to do something, it needs to be at a level, right? And I'd like things to be world-class. I believe we can do that here in New Zealand. I feel like our geographical remoteness isn't an issue at all, right? So in fact, often it's an advantage. CreatorCon, it's the only event where TikTok and Meta collaborate anywhere in the world because it's New Zealand, right? So there's a, you know, it's not only can we do something amazing in New Zealand, we can do something that no one else can do, right?
So they don't care because it's in New Zealand? They don't care about the...
I think...
Is it the novelty of being down here?
I think it's because literally we're able to have a couple of beers with the two country managers met. They liked each other. Then the teams kind of know each other. So they're like, yeah, well, I kind of trust you. You're not going to do me over. And so it's been really, really awesome. And again, it just shows you the advantage of one of the advantages we have in New Zealand. There's a level of trust in being able to collaborate with what other people would think are competitors because you're kind of looking for the overall good. So often those are the types of things I'll do.
Okay. We're kind of getting into the current date and we've got a lot of storytelling to do before we meet here because this futuristic Brooke who we're talking to now is a world away from X Games rollerbladed Brooke. And I was,
Can I jump in for a point of clarification?
Yes.
Rollerblading, inline skating.
Same thing.
Or aggressive inline skating.
Well, I think because, and I'm not partially, I wouldn't say I'm partially responsible for the term aggressive skating, but it was certainly the group of people that I was with when rollerblading was wanting to differentiate itself. You know, the street, the park, the handrails, the ramps wanted to differentiate themselves from the people that were on the boardwalks, you know, and the lycra. And so I don't know who came up with the term aggressive skating, but it kind of stuck for a while. In a period where the 90s, it was formative, right? That was the most 90s moment ever, was like you know, X Games rollerblading probably is as 90s as it gets. Yeah.
So what was your path? You were really good at it. Did you do skating as well, but you were better at rollerblading?
Yeah, so I was on a development ski team. So I really wanted to go to the Olympics for skiing, and I was on a development ski team. The rest of the D team, it was called, it doesn't sound like the D stood for development. Okay?
No, I got you, bro. I got that. I understand what the team was.
I wouldn't even go there, but okay, now I'm thinking of that. Yeah, you were part of the D team at college in America, weren't you?
That's totally going to be taken out of context.
Yeah, it's good though, and we're definitely going to do that.
So as a part of the D team, but the rest of them would go overseas and train in the off season, you know, winter overseas, and we just didn't have that kind of money as a family, and so I saw someone rollerblading, a good friend, and I was like, "This looks like skiing to me. I think this could be a good training."
Was that Mike?
No, that seems like a very specific.
Well, I only asked that because Mike said as part of your development he would drive you to the top of Titirangi Hill, you would blade all the way down and go and do it again and again.
Mark, that's Mark. No, that's right, Mark. I was like, who's Mike?
Who the fuck is Mike?
Mark was a part of it. It was a guy called Justin Gross, sadly not with us anymore. And you know, I know you guys are passionate about mental health, but Justin was my first friend that took his life. So as in terms of my closest friend, and we've all been affected by it. But formative years in I don't even know late 80s, like 1989, we kind of discovered it. And by 91, I was living in the States. I'd gotten good enough at it to where when some people toured through here, they said, you need to go to the States and give it a crack.
Did that seem crazy to you as a teenager?
I was again undiagnosed ADHD and probably some other stuff there, and so I would just kind of do things. My mum is a brilliant artist and was a world-class ice carver, and so she was going to the World Championships in Russia in 1991, which is like insane. Perestroika and Glasnost, and I managed to convince her to let me to come along, and so on the way back, I just jumped off the plane and stayed in LA.
Wow.
And so, you know, I was kind of like, you know, at an age where I didn't understand the kind of repercussions of this. I'd enrolled in university. That didn't really pan out that well.
Yeah.
And then just stuck around and then skated for a while.
Because it was a law degree that you started?
Yeah, I started. And I had this wonderful godmother at the time who's Ecuadorian, kind of like lovely lady. And she said, you can't be a slave to two masters. That was her point. You've got to choose one of these. And I decided to give up on my pretty average university career and just focus on LA.
And was it as simple as just jumping off at LAX, clearing customs and starting?
Back in those days it was. And, you know, nowadays I managed to go later on as I started to build out the businesses and NZTE, and then eventually the government was great at helping me get my visa back after they booted me out of America.
There's a great story around that.
20 years. Some of the stories about me getting kicked out are definitely fake. I hear stories every now and then. I'm like, I wish that were the case.
Well, can you set the record straight? Because we've heard a couple of versions in the research.
Yeah. So at the time this is right just after 1996 X Games. And I was flying back from Austria via Boston and then to LA, and it was reasonably late at night, and my passport was pretty ragged. As a Kiwi, you have to use it as ID.
Was it the old blue one that the coat of arms rubbed off it?
It was dog-eared up, and so the guy that kind of like red flagged me, and they called my good friend Arlo Eisenberg, who's like a brilliant artist and a great skater. He was the world champ at the time. And he said, yeah, he's doing great here. He's started a company. He got third at the X Games last year. He's making lots of money. And they were like, yeah, well, he's not allowed to do that. And then obviously they arrested me there. And there was about 6 or 7 hours between the arrest and you go into this kind of holding area and the next flight back. They can't send me to New Zealand, right? Because there's just no direct flight. So they just like stuff it, you're going back to Austria. And so I get to talking to them and they're lovely, you know, they're kind of not that far off my age and they're nice people. And I say, would it be funny, you know, what happens next? And they said, well, we put you on the plane. I said, how? And they said, well, we escort you and we put you on the plane, you go. I said, would it be funny if you made a big deal about it? And, you know, because we're just sitting there, we're shooting the shit, cutting it. And one of the guys in particular took this joke really seriously. So they went with like guns drawn, me cuffed.
Holy shit.
And they put me back on the plane. And the whole point of this had been me thinking, I'm going to get some seats around me. And overkill. They cleared this entire area out and they sat me. So I had a whole bunch of seats around me. But of course, because I hadn't thought about consequences, the Austrian Airlines team were like, they immediately just called ahead. And they said to the slightly gung-ho guy, says to the hostess, don't give him his passport until you're over international waters.
Oh, wow.
So effectively they put this like fear of God into this crew, and then once we took off, they called ahead to Austria, where they arrested me the moment I landed.
Like, if that's the real version, I'd love to know the crazy versions that are out there doing the rounds.
To reach the top in the field of aggressive inline blading, you got to put your body on the line, right? Like, how mangled is your body?
Bad. It's pretty bad. I know that we're far away here, but can you see that elbow?
Yeah.
And then this other elbow, this has got like just a bit of bone that kind of like floats around in it.
You got no fear of breaking a bone? Like, you've got to be that way to succeed?
Back in those days, probably less of a fear than was healthy, right? So you just sit there and kind of go, well, you know, what's the worst that could happen? And you didn't really think about it, right? I wasn't that conscious of the repercussions. Nowadays, of course, when I can't walk in the morning, and I'm far, far more cautious. But yeah. So if you are young out there and thinking about like breaking your body, your parents are right. It hurts later on.
Teeth?
Almost all of these aren't real.
Yeah.
So almost all of these are like, there's probably like 7 or 8 up here that are fake, and a couple on the bottom.
Is that because they just knocked out from falling?
Yeah, it's not a funny story, but it was cool because I was doing a show with Matt Hoffman and Tony Hawk, and I literally like fell from 24 feet up and just landed on my face. And so my teeth just exploded.
Oh.
And one of the teeth, we still don't know how, was like stuck into my back.
Whoa.
So I don't really understand the impact zone.
The video footage of that?
No. This would have been, it was just like a rehearsal, and that would have been, early 90s.
Yeah.
Before videos were invented.
But that is the thing, like Gleaming the Cube and those sort of kind of, like video was a big part of that whole culture, right? That kind of found footage style that we call it now.
Yeah, I mean, back in those days, everything was still, I mean, we're so lucky now with just how accessible like content capture was. We started making movies, and you know, the seminal in inline skating, the kind of the core movies are a movie called the Hoax series with that Arlo, the guy who got me kicked out. Arlo and I made those. A similar story, just told people we were making a video when we really weren't. We were just kind of like filming bits, and we'd press a tape recorder and then press play on the thing. Hence why it's called the Hoax, that series, because we weren't really making a video, which ended up being a video.
Okay, so the next chapter is, and I didn't mention this in the start, but 11 years building 9 international companies in the skate industry, including one of the world's largest, which was Senate. And at its peak, it was doing 14 million a year in turnover.
In US dollars.
US dollars.
That's about 30 million New Zealand it was doing at its peak. Yeah.
So is this the when Arlo says to the guys, he's doing really well, you're doing really, really well.
Yeah, and Arlo is my collaborator on that. And Arlo's actually, he's a genius, brilliant artist. And we started with him just drawing on T-shirts, and we were doing like $1,000 a year in 1993. But by 1997, it was massive, just giant, huge warehouse, 50 staff, 100 and something countries around the world selling it. And then by like 1999, it was kind of gone.
Yeah, but as you're building up, what is your role? Are you hands-on running the business? Or?
Yeah, I think we thought we were. So it's a really interesting deal where when there's that much momentum, we're at the front of a wave, where we started a clothing company in action sports right at the same time that the X Games started. And so, Arlo was one of the biggest stars. I can talk a little bit, and I had a passion for this idea of building companies, but we didn't know what we were doing. So pretty early on, we started partnering with some people that were much better at the actual, delivery of a company. And we would deliver the marketing primarily. So we'd just come up with marketing ideas. And half of them were terrible. One went very viral, where a name tag. It was a little sew tag that Arlo made in the back of a shirt that said "Destroy all girls" after a breakup, and that just ended up going super viral, and that made mums want to ban the company and kids want to buy it.
So I watched the video in the research to this, and it was back in that day, and it was like 20-year-old Brooke and Arlo, and they were talking about that. And there were some comments under it where you sort of reflected on, and we have this a lot with guests of a certain age, and it's kind of like there was a time and an era, but also it's interesting to think about what you do think about that now.
Yeah, and it's really interesting at the time. At the time you're in your 20s, and I often think about how, particularly of our generation, I hope it's gone now, this sort of adversarial relationship that you have as a young guy and young girls. You kind of, especially if your young guys have been left out in the cold. I'm sure that there were some guys that girls were talking to. It certainly wasn't me. But that sense of adversarial nature that we had, and I look at, we thought, so we had a mum in the middle of Midwestern America who's found the label and then went to the National Organization of Women and like highlighted how bad this was, and then it blew up. MTV, NBC, CBS, you've probably seen all this stuff, right? And so we thought this was genius, but what we never thought was, now back in those days, we didn't think about what it was like to be a woman in 1993 America, or anywhere in the world, where you're already a heavily marginalized group. Domestic violence is completely unchecked. It's still legal to hit your wife in most countries in the world, right? Yeah. And so your sense of any kind of thing, us not understanding as a segment, we felt like a marginalized segment, that we were just punching down at another marginalized segment, right? So that's not a context we had in those days, because we weren't, I just don't think we were smart enough or empathetic enough to understand that. We could have picked on anyone, right? But yeah.
So what's the lifestyle like? Mid-20s, Brooke, this company's making shitloads of money. You're doing well. You're friends with Tony Hawk and Matt Hoffman.
Yeah, yep. I love those guys. A lot of the skaters from the different, despite the friction, the perceived friction. Tony, at the time, I think, was married to a rollerblader. Lots of friends with skateboarders. I was a douchebag, I think is the way that you'd explain me then. That's the best way to describe me. I would literally, it was awful. It was awful. And, I talk about this just reflecting on, we talk about how great Amber is. Like the 20th anniversary this week, by the way, guys.
Yeah, congrats.
Yes.
Congrats.
And you think about the last 20 years and those, 30 odd years that I had before meeting Amber. And I was already decreasing in douchebaggery when I met Amber, because it was pretty hard to go up from where I was in my mid-20s, when we thought we were geniuses, right? So we really thought that we were the reason why this company had gone large, when realistically it was just a very lucky bit of timing. I dressed like a douchebag. I drove like a douchebag. Yeah.
I attended at university in Hamilton a talk by Kevin Roberts from Saatchi & Saatchi, and he spoke about if you want to be successful, like find what you love and find a way to make money out of it.
Yeah.
Was that a case for Senate? Like, was it just a love of that and then mobilizing a community?
Yeah. So that's the common thread, I think. If you look at everything I've ever done, I like finding a cause and then creating a community around that, then affecting change. And often communities are driven by the types of products and the identifiers that communities have. So for us, as a marginalized community, rollerblading in the 90s, it was unique and different and often kind of in this fractious relationship with other sports. So the company, Senate, was an identifier that told people that you're into rollerblading. And, so in 97, we sold 750,000 T-shirts for scale, so that's like, and so you're out there and you're walking around in Poland and you'd see kids wearing your T-shirt. It's pretty amazing, right? And so, so building the products was kind of a side effect of building the community, which I love those community poker, building communities. And then the content then started to come as a result of that, which is where my love for content came from.
Just as a contextual, just as a timepiece, LA in the kind of early mid-90s was an interesting place in itself, like the riots and Rodney King. What was that like as an outsider living there?
Yeah, so I arrived just before the riots, and so that was insane. I mean, that was truly crazy, and still in the context of everything that's going on in the world right now, you know, they literally burnt huge parts of LA down, and it was insane. There's footage of this. I was there when O.J. Simpson, we lived in near La Tierra, the big freeway overcross, you know, overbridge, and we lived in Westchester, and so we had like an hour, and we were on that overbridge where there's the party happening. We went and got the liquor store, and so it was a time in LA where all these different crazy things were happening. But yeah, pretty crazy.
Has anyone described your life a bit like Forrest Gump before?
Well, it's like Forrest Gump, but I'm not doing anything cool. I'm just like watching cool things happen. Yeah. Just watching.
I don't know. You're doing some pretty cool things.
Okay.
So, some of it, I'll tell you what. Something's interesting, and it's always interesting in this. Whether I'll make it. For a long time, when I came back to New Zealand, I started telling the stories. Then I stopped because people may not believe them, or they think that you're kind of like bullshitting. And so I just stopped telling them. And now I think that where there's enough context and potentially everything's a little bit more easy to understand, then happy to tell them now.
Great. Yeah, because just to stay on the riots thing, I've watched some footage of that recently. It's crazy.
Oh, it's nuts
to see what was happening in the looting, and it was like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Nuts.
I've spoken to a few people, and they said, ask him how he lost his money. What happened?
Well, because I thought it was a genius. And my wife will also tell you, I enjoy things. I don't necessarily care that much about money. So I think moments have always meant more to me than money. Hence why, like, I might spend the last X dollars on something, which is why it's good to have Amber, because otherwise I'd be broke. In fact, when I met Amber, I was broke. And then steadily we've kind of like managed to build a life together where she kind of like looks and stares at me and kind of goes, we're not doing that, Brooke, right now. We can't afford that. So when I did it before Amber and when Senate was going crazy, I would just do stupid things. I went and bought an Audi with cash. Actually, we tried to buy a Saab, and the Saab dealer thought I was a drug dealer. So we went and bought this Audi, brand new Audi, the first year the A4 came out. And then within 2 weeks, I'd taken it to a dirt jump, and we tried to jump it on a dirt jump and trashed it. And there's footage. There's a guy in the back seat. This was for some kind of MTV something. It's like, I'm showing off, right? This is douchebag Brooke here. It sounds funny now, but it's also like, what a waste.
Yeah.
And the guy was in the back seat, and I said, this is going to get a little bit rough. And he goes, I went to Vietnam. And I was like, okay. And he was screaming like a little child. We finally jumped the car.
How many cars had you jumped prior to that?
No, none. And also, when I say jumped, it didn't look like a Dukes of Hazzard thing. It wasn't a cool enough jump for the damage it did. We managed to get it. The car, I was doing donuts afterwards, and the same film guy looks around and goes, what's that big black line behind us? Everywhere there was this big black trail. And so I was like, I better get this home. So I'm driving it, and it stopped on the freeway.
Oh, no.
Audi came and picked it up, and I said to Audi, listen, I don't know what that you've done, guys, but this is 2 weeks old. This thing needs to be sorted out. When, of course, not thinking they just lifted up and half of the Mojave Desert just fell out of the bottom of the car. And they're like, yeah, so stupid.
Have you always been a very good communicator in situations like that? Or did you learn that over time?
Bullshitting.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way, I was being diplomatic.
Probably. I mean, the sense of being able to kind of tell a yarn to try to get out of a bit of trouble was probably essential, considering kind of my direction as a child. I was a little bit wayward, right? So I'd do stupid things.
Just to close the chapter on Senate before you bring you back home, what happened to the company? It continued to grow, and then what happened?
So if there are people out there that are building something and it's going really well, it's really interesting. We tend to always project forward on best case scenario. No one, when you're a 22-year-old kid in LA,
40-year-old podcaster,
40-year-old podcaster. But you sit there and you go, wait, we had 500,000 followers. now we've got 1 million followers. Next year we're going to have 2 million followers. And we were predicting like that. We were projecting that this wave was going to go forever. And of course, the action sports wave, and specifically rollerblading, went from up here 20 million people a year doing it, just down to fell off a cliff, right? And so I'd been kicked out of the country. I was trying to run it with my friends from here. My 4 best friends then sued me for abandonment. We're still good friends, but their lawyers were suing my lawyers. Right. And then so I eventually settled with them for a very small amount of money, started a shoe company, lost all of that money. So anyone that bought Pointer footwear?
Yeah, got it on my notes.
It was a great company. It was way ahead of its time. So,
man, I would encourage you to keep telling your story.
Yeah.
Like I've got so many questions, but there's so much that I'm going to move us forward to. But I want to connect you back to New Zealand and talk to us about the origins of Pony, because I want to get straight into how that's set up. Because did you
ever go?
Yeah, I went to Pony.
I always felt like I couldn't get in, so I never went in. I was always upstairs.
I think you're probably accurate. That's an accurate.
Yeah,
I'm joking.
I was always. Well, it's because I was always upstairs, I never wondered what was downstairs. I guess the treats of upstairs didn't allow me to go downstairs.
I'm totally joking. You would have been totally fine to get in.
Yeah,
The big controversy with Pony obviously was when I sent out the letter about like hordes of guys that used to, come down, and we banned groups of guys coming, right? So there's giant controversy.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember that, but so I was
too busy tipping at the top.
Yeah, that's right.
A lot of my early income went into showgirls.
I feel like you're trying to get some kind of a sponsorship deal going.
No, I'm just trying to exercise some of my own demons of kind of yeah.
So I love music, and I was lucky enough when I came back from the States, I started doing some work for Warner's Music, and they gave me a couple of projects early on. One was the Feelers, and one was Anika Moore, and it was a the real surge in New Zealand music back then. The year that kind of she had dropped an album, Feelers Communicate came out, was massive, and Anika was great, and we were doing some web stuff for them and some design stuff, and I ended up getting reasonably close with James Reid, who's the lead singer of the Feelers, and living with Anika. And so I was around all of these great musicians, and James and I started jamming drunk. And I think even Anika, I think we did like some busking maybe on Parnell Rise. I think that happened.
Wow.
I think no one gave her any, she was like massive at the time. No one believed it was. Anyways, I think that's a true story. And then we found a single bar called Float, and we started on a Thursday night upstairs. We'd just start getting musicians would all come along and jam and play covers. And so Sing Sing became a really big thing. Like 500, 600 people every Thursday night would come down, and like we had Coldplay came and played when they were in town, Yellow Card, all these different bands. If you're in town and you're a band, you'd come and you'd jam and just play a cover, and someone, Jason Kerrison from Op Shop would be singing, and Anika would be playing drums, et cetera, et cetera. And that was awesome. And then one day, the guy that owned Float called me and said, I'm going to buy Showgirls. You want to see what's downstairs? It's crazy. And, Ron King, who owned Showgirls, and he emptied out underneath Showgirls, and contained it like a pool, and he built his private club down there. And if you went there, it was all red velvet with bronze poles.
I did go there. I've got kind of flashbacks. Well, really low ceiling.
It was Showboys for a while as well.
Yeah, that's right. It was. It actually was. Yeah, I thought it was a gag, and then I was like, no, it definitely was. Yeah, that's right. But did it have a low ceiling? Or imagine that.
Yeah. Actually, it's funny you say that, because obviously, because it became very popular for the athletes and musicians, and a bunch of the locks would come in, and they'd always be kind of just ducking below the mirror ceilings and the ceilings. Yeah. So I took that over with Grant, and we created a pony club, and a guy called Andy Penny, who's he used to have the crowbar. And it was a nuts 6 years. Sometimes I wish I hadn't done it, and and sometimes you're like, there were crazy memories there.
Yeah, it's been described as like the Studio 54 of New Zealand, and I had on my list like Lady Gaga was there, Al McPherson, who else we got there? Shay.
Oh, it was
bunch of the biggest names. But
Tommy Lee, I think, was the other one.
Tommy Lee rented it for 4 days, and he had us change the name of it to Tommyland.
Yeah,
and that story's a little bit tough because there are people. There was a very well-known New Zealand, quite attractive actually, this is the interesting thing. We had, Timberlake and Snoop Dogg and Gaga and all these people that came down. The girls around Tommy Lee, it was completely different because they'd seen his penis and they'd watched the tape. They'd lost it. It was nuts. So we had to put up ropes around him to keep them from bombing.
Really?
And these were well-known news presenter females that were crazy about. Anyways,
he was a whole phenomenon though.
He was a phenomenon.
Once that Pringles can came out, it was nuts. People didn't want to people wanted to know if that was real or not.
Yeah,
I'm going to go dig in for a few specific stories.
Yes.
John, is there a good John Campbell story?
Yeah, and so I really early on, it was very early on because at the time I was on TV3. I was on Target. Every Tuesday, 7:30, Target would come on. It was one of the biggest shows on Target, on TV3. And TV3, after the TV Awards, said, we'll have our party down there. I don't think they understood what they were getting into because it just opened up. And there was this huge line outside when Carol Hirschfeld and John Campbell arrived. And because they're such sweethearts, they didn't want to cut the line in front of everyone. That's just not a very Carol and John thing to do. And they were like, is there another way in? And I was like, actually, there is, because there was right round, and this is right back in the early days at Fort Street, not the gentrified version you've got now. So on just around and just before the Mermaids, there was this little dark alleyway, and then you'd go up a little bit of fire escape, and you'd go down through our back door. And so I'm taking John and Carol. I'm like, okay, yeah, we'll go around this way. And it's not something I've done all that often just because it's pretty sketchy. And as we're getting down the alleyway, I just see this movement, and John and Carol are having a nice conversation about global geopolitics. And as we get this more and more movement, closer and closer, and we get to a little bit of a bottleneck to where there's only enough room for 3 people to fit through, and 2 of them happen to be a guy having sex with a prostitute, right there. And we've committed the walk, and so we just have to walk, and we walk past. We've got to brush past. And the guy and the girl look back over their shoulder and they see John Campbell and Carol Hirschfeld. And of course, John goes, marvelous. And then kind of just rolls in. So somewhere, I always love those stories because somewhere there's the other side of that story.
Yeah. Love to fact check that with John.
I'm thinking about the prostitute has definitely told that story. Yeah. I don't know if the guy.
If you're listening to if you were that prostitute and you want to get in touch.
I also love the detail of they both looked over their shoulder, so it paints a picture of.
I'll tell you what John will deny on that. He'll deny he said marvelous. He claims that he doesn't say marvelous as much as he does, but I'm pretty sure I remember marvelous.
Okay, that's a good starter. Was there a Robin Malcolm story as well?
So again, same year, very early on, I get this call, and it's a production company. Or I think it's a production company. It's a lady, and she's like, listen, we're just about to wrap a TV show. Can we hire? We've heard you've got an okay nightclub. Can we rent it? And I said yes. And because back in the day, I'm just trying to get any cash through the door. And so we blocked it out for the night, and they came down. It was the very first season of Outrageous Fortune, and so none of us knew anything about what was going to become this cultural phenomenon. And but we knew that Robin Malcolm's a star, and all of the other stars, they're having the time of their life on the dance floor. And anyone remembers the Pony Club dance floor is at the back of the club, and it's precariously placed right underneath the dance floor above, where every now and then they pull up a bathtub and they'll fill it with some water and they'll put a stag into the bathtub. Okay. And on this particular night, just as the Outrageous Fortune people were celebrating, and it was kind of like slowing down into I think a really nice period where everyone was having the time of their life. The stag jumped in and the stripper juice just exploded out of the bath and just started raining through, literally it was like a rain, a heavy Auckland thick rain came down, and it took everyone a little while to kind of figure out that they were covered in stripper juice.
Wow, yeah. I've watched a lot of those a lot of those stag shows. I know exactly the routine
because you sort of teased us with that one in the DM. There's a story about Robin, Robin Malcolm and stripper juice, and I don't know. That's all I knew.
I did say it's, if you say there's a story about Robin Malcolm and stripper juice, that's not as good a story as you're expecting. Yeah. So I just didn't want that to be too bad.
Okay, last one I want to go after. I'd heard there was a time where, and this is probably not a funny story, but actually you got beat up a bunch of people were waiting for you and beat the crap out of you in a car park.
Yeah. That's. I mean, you're right. That isn't a funny story.
No, I was going to juxtapose it with. It must be quite a stressful. A nightclub owner, runner, I would imagine it was a high-stress job.
It is actually. It's not unfunny because it kind of shows, again, overconfidence. So 2 young guys who turned out to be from the South Island and not used to Auckland were at the door. Their girlfriends had been let in and they were being pretty overtly racist. And we had staff who were being incredibly tolerant. A couple of, Samoan doormen who were just being really
junior.
Yeah, it might have been. No, it might have actually been. It might have been. Either ways, it was 2 people that really want to hit these 2 young guys, and they were being really cocky. And I said, listen, if you're going to talk shit like that in Auckland, you're going to get the shit kicked out of you. And then the guys stuffed off. And I went downstairs, and I realized I'd left my wallet in my car, so I went to go get my wallet. And the 2 guys happened to be parked right next to where my car was. And they said, do you want to go? And I said, yes, not knowing that they were both like professional kickboxers.
Oh, wow.
So the one guy did like a spinning jump kick. And I was like, wow, really? And they said yes. And then the rest of it, I don't remember much of. I think I did actually. The funnier part is I did hit them at one point in time, and I think they laughed. I think they were like, I connected with one flailing shot, and I remember them kind of dismissing that as humorous. And when a crowd kind of got them off, and they stuffed off, and I got up to go back in, and they were like, you need to go to hospital. I said, no. And they said, you haven't seen your face, and my nose was kind of fully 90. I don't know if you know this, but noses can go like fully 90 degrees, like fully pointing left.
And at the same time, you're a nightclub owner. You are running.
Yeah, I had to go Target the next day.
You're running a TV operation, right?
8 in the morning. I'm not running it. And the greatest thing about Target was also the thing that made me want to leave it, which was I didn't really do much. They had a whole operation where they would research, they'd get everything done, and then I would literally just walk around Auckland shouting and waving my arms, and they'd film it, right?
You did wave your arms a lot, didn't you?
What's that? And
I do remember that criticism of the arms being quite...
What happened, I was doing Access TV and loving it, which was a great show. I'd go out to Sky, get drunk, and talk shit over action sports. And then for some reason, they asked me to audition for Target, and I sent this video of me, and I was being a bit over the top, and they just leant into it. Every year they'd make it harder, more and more energy. And I'd be like, hey, what? Flies? And I couldn't do the shtick too sticky. They would just they ate it up. And so yes, you're right. So I would finish up at the nightclub on this particular night. I finished up at Auckland at an emergency room with some no anesthetic lady kind of putting my nose in. And then you'd have to go to Target the next day, and they'd kind of smear some shit over your eyes to make it look like you hadn't been up all night. And
you had been up all night. You've been really burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah. It was, and so it couldn't last. Like Amber and the boss at TV3 had an intervention. They were like, you can either be married and have a show on TV3 or have Pony Club. So I got rid of Pony Club.
Is that true story?
Oh yeah, 100%. Full intervention. Sue Woodfield and Amber Peebles. They were like, this does not work. And Pony was particularly bad because the first people arrived at like 10 o'clock. And so you're not getting out of there till 2 or 3, right?
And is the expectation as well, because you are a prominent personality, that you will always be there to host and welcome?
Basically my job. That's basically what I was doing, right? So that's how I made money. Because if I didn't do it, if I didn't organize the people to come, and if I wasn't there when they came, it would have been Pony.
That's a good intervention. That's not sustainable, right?
No. Everyone should do it for like 6 weeks. They should give every 20-year-old a bath, or 20-something-year-old a bath for 6 weeks. But at the stage I was in life, where I'd found this incredible life partner, and I wasn't acknowledging kind of how lucky I was. I hadn't acknowledged that at that point in time. And I was all over the show. I think it's reasonably public that I'd had, a sex scandal, and I was all over the show. And so I look back on it now, and I'm like, incredibly lucky that Amber was able to see past that and kind of see into the future of what I was capable of being as opposed to what a douchebag I was.
Yeah, look, I'm keen to lean into this area if you're okay in talking about it. When I spoke to Amber, and we get quite personal in these calls, and I'm like, look, I just want to tell his story in the best way. Like, what's some sort of adversity or some struggles Brooke's faced? And she said, look, he hasn't always loved the person that he is, and he's worked on that quite hard. And I sort of asked, how you'd evolved and changed over the 20 years you'd been together. I wondered if you're in a place that you can talk about what that means.
Oh, yeah. And I think, I talked earlier about the sense of, I don't think that in my life I did enough to work towards understanding what relationships were, right? So I was probably already a little bit cursed with being on a part of the spectrum where there will be side effects of being this kind of ADHD where it's harder to develop the same kind of empathy patterns as other people, right? So you have to work on those. And then living by myself on tour in this kind of very transactional world, we would just go to another spot. Everyone would find a girl. They'd make out with the girl. They'd fuck off the next day, right?
This is the rollerblade,
this is that
inline skating era.
And that skate era. And so by the time I got back here, I just had a really dysfunctional relationship with women and with myself. And then because I do have an understanding of what a great relationship could be, I love my parents' relationship. It's amazing. It's not perfect, but they're amazing. They're still together and they deeply love each other. So I have this as something to see, and then I'm doing this over here. And so I think Amber helped me early on identify how much self-hate I had, because I do these things and immediately feel like shit. And there are people out there doing this right now. I guarantee it. They're doing this and they're on kind of rinse and repeat. They're on automatic because they think like, why wouldn't I do this if I've got this opportunity? If this girl wants to make out with me, I may as well do it. And so, so the self-hate, of course, then is very cyclical. And I think most people aren't in a relationship where I just had this gut feeling that, well, not gut feeling, she was able to communicate with me that she was kind of like there for me to try to improve. And so there's a poker story where like one of the only times I was running okay at Christchurch at the New Zealand Poker Championships final table, and I had chips on the table, and Mike and I had this conversation, Mike King, and I had this conversation, and at this point in time, it's probably pre-Mike's journey now, and I'd gone out for this crazy night in Christchurch, and I'd kind of seen all of these guys being, just their lives weren't the lives that I wanted to replicate. And I just woke up and I was like, I think I'm going to go home and tell Amber everything. And so I left the tournament just and if anyone knows how bad I am at poker, the idea that I'd made final day and I was like, so I just got a flight, went home and then just told Amber everything. And that started, I think, that sense of being able to, we will often have very hard conversations. So I hope that we can have really hard conversations. And it's served us over the last 20 years to continually improve our relationship.
How long into the relationship was that difficult conversation?
Yeah, well, that was fairly long into. So after we got married, she would say probably if I'd had the conversation before we got married, she probably would have had more outs, right? And that's that sense. So, however it is, I mean, the truth is, and this is where the opposite side of the self-hate is, I'm a really good husband. I work really hard to make every day better for Amber, like really, really hard. And I love doing that. That's something that gives me great joy. And so every work on that I have is I can balance it with that, right?
That's such an amazing admission.
Oh, yeah.
For someone to make about themselves and their own relationship, shows where it is. Yeah. And like grandiose displays of affection as well, right? Like song lyrics, meters and meters high.
Yeah. I keep forgetting you guys have researched this. I was like,
how did you know?
No, so on one of our early anniversaries, I had like the this Jason Kiris, No Ordinary Thing was like, because of Sing Sing, it's a great song. It's actually a breakup song, but it was our romance song. It is our romance song. And so I had it painted on, we lived by a railway. This is early days of kind of trying to get back up on our feet. And across there was this giant wall. And so we put it like 2 meter high, No Ordinary Thing on that. Yeah, and then I think writing your girlfriend a song sounds romantic, but I bet you she would have wanted a handbag. Yeah. I did write it. I think I wrote a song with James Red. It was a good song. It's a good song.
Is that Happy Tree?
Not Happy Tree, no. And ironically, Happy Tree I only wrote half of. When I say ironically, it's if you know Happy Tree, if you're from that skate industry, it's something that's very connected to me. But Danny Ross wrote the first half and I wrote the second half.
Do you still get the guitar out and play Happy Tree when you can?
Every now and then when I get drunk. There is some very good footage from Los Angeles recently of that.
We'll find it.
Yeah,
we'll
that shows, yeah. I only say that because I pulled it off. Sometimes I don't pull it off.
The other thing Amber said might be interesting to talk about. I told her a little bit about the podcast, and she's like, I think it'd be good to talk about Brooke's poker scene. And not for the reasons that we want, what you might think. It's because she said that you have conversations and develop friendships there where it's a space where you can talk about things that you wouldn't otherwise. And I know mental health and suicide is something that's affected both you and Amber personally. And can you speak to that space and what happens there?
Yeah, and it's really interesting. So poker came along initially with a crew called the Levita Poker Crew. Awesome crew, and we played every day for, sorry, not every day, every Monday for about 15 years. But for the last 20 odd years, I've been playing with the High Life crew. And I don't know if you know Adam Bennett and High Life and those guys. And it's truly incredible. Like we might still get like 18 people on a Wednesday night, all guys. And the conversations are great. It's always a place for people to lean on each other. And we've got about 3 or 4 of the guys that have said that it saved their life. So, you know, they've been in really dark spots, but on Wednesday night, you can definitely go there. You can catch a ride with a mate, maybe have a more private conversation with your mate on the way there. And then when you get there, you can kind of open up. And it's so interesting because we don't have many places where guys can have those deep conversations that aren't just, you know, getting blurry drunk.
And you're always, the other thing she said is you'll always answer the call. You'll always take the time. You're very giving, you know, and is it because of the experiences that you've had with your friend or? Oh, yeah. Well,
I mean, you say that. It's really tough, right? Especially now. Yeah, early on, losing Justin was really tough, really, really tough, just because no one prepares you for that, or at least in those days they certainly didn't. And it happened a year after Amber, maybe even less than a year after Amber lost her brother. So it really bonded us. And so since then, obviously, we've gotten better at talking about it. And what this means now is that we've all got friends. I think most people have friends now that are reaching out, and it's pretty hard not to take those calls. But that said, I would like to encourage people to build methodologies that help those people, friends of ours that are reaching out to us, reach out to professionals, because it's a lot of load on you as well if you've got friends that are just hitting you up all the time, every time they're feeling that way, you know. So, and
you don't always know what to do when you're receiving those calls as well, right? And how to act. I mean, you can be on the other end of the phone, or you can be the person that just sits with.
Yeah.
But you're right. Like that's
It's a pretty tough thing, and especially because some of the battles will be lost, and then it throws you into some really tougher spots. You know, like what could I have done? Which again, it's not a productive conversation to have with yourself ever, right? The sense is, as a society, and we're doing a better job, we've got to build real structure, real education, and make sure that there are pathways for people that are feeling that are feeling like they need to talk or they're in a tough spot. Those pathways can't be, I'm just going to call a mate and hope that they know what to say. So yeah, educate all of us on how to get them through the first little bit and then push them into better pathways. Yeah. And of course, you know, now that Mike's got the funding for I Am Hope, and there's been a lot of coverage around that, potentially that could help a lot.
Love it. It's so cool. It's cool having these conversations and having the space to talk about it. But thank you for sharing all that stuff with us.
Have you had Mike King on your show?
Not yet.
No.
He's a good poker player.
I've
a bloody good player. He's bloody
down
good.
At that Christchurch.
Yes, he's won that thing, that little bastard. He's very good.
Without going too much, 20th anniversary, is that a very special celebration? Did you have a special celebration one? You don't have to tell us too much, but some might be taking notes.
I met Amber on her birthday.
21st?
We're at the Edge radio station where I was just starting, and Amber had been there for a while. And so we're going to celebrate the 20th anniversary, not this weekend, but next weekend, especially. But we had a really special day on the day on her birthday. So I think it's not a small thing, again, considering just everything that we've gone through. I'm pretty proud of where we're at.
And the view from the outside is that you're different personalities but complement each other so well. And I've heard you use I think quite a really awesome metaphor of you'll get the two of you to the plane to skydive.
Yeah.
But she'll make sure you guys have got the parachute.
Yeah, that's right. Without me, we don't go skydiving. Without her, we don't have a parachute. Yeah. And so it's a much better metaphor than the handbrake, right? It's understanding just how important it is in these and lots of relationships like this that I know of. You just have this balance where she's able to kind of, there's after 3. Do you know the story about? I don't even know how relevant that story is. There's some cool parts to that. Let's see if there's good parts of the story. When Dan Carter got injured in 2011, and so I had Pony Club at this time. It's like right near the end of my tenure at Pony Club. And the NZRU did not like me, right? Because I was kind of like...
Because you caused us to lose in 2007 by hosting the coverage in France.
That's very close to the truth. That is really close to the truth. That's a whole other story. I didn't cause us to lose, but that was my first day covering the All Blacks. And I'd just moved from Manu Samoa in England. My very first day, I interviewed them. I could tell something was wrong. And I think do you guys have a sense of how bad that camp was, that All Black camp? The division?
No.
Listen, I know you've had Chewy on and but that was the camp where Pauser had been, remember, left off the team because he was home late, and Reuben Thorne was the guy that dobbed him in, right? Mm. And so you had this massive north-south divide. And they didn't feel... So I got there, I was like, they didn't feel great. I think Richie was feeling sick. It was my birthday, October 6, 2007, the day I'd rented the most expensive nightclub in Cardiff, Tiger. I'd rented the whole top floor for it. I even invited Helen Clark. I invited everybody to this party that was going to be this crowning moment. It gets worse. So also, because this is at peak kind of like I'm feeling pretty overconfident. I'm hosting the Rugby World Cup. I'm living in France. I've come up with this plan. Amber's at MTV, and I talked her MTV crew into pretending she'd won a trip through one of their internal competitions. And instead of going to Australia, when she gets there, she's actually flying to Paris. And so I'm going to propose to her on October the 8th.
Oh, wow.
She's got an incredible dad. Greg he was one of the senior guys at Westpac. If your company owed more than 20 million bucks and you're in trouble, Greg would come in and kick ass and take names. And so he's very intimidating, very scary, and probably was still very much on the fence as to me as a boyfriend. So when I wanted to propose to Amber, I came up with this incredible scheme. Convince MTV to fool her, be nice. She'll come to Paris. I'll pretend that it's not me, it's MTV. On the 6th of October, straight after the All Blacks destroy France at Cardiff, I'll call her dad. It'll be 10 in the morning. He won't be drunk yet. We would have just smashed them, and then I'll say, "Can I get your blessing?" So this plan was going great until I don't know who to blame it on, because of course they're probably all going to watch. They all probably watch your show. But anyways, Luke McAllister, who'd been drop goals from fucking everyone on the field, wasn't able to get the piece over, and then fucking Wayne Barnes stuffed it up. Anyways, point being, were either of you at that game?
No, I remember exactly where I was.
So it's about 60,000 Kiwis in Cardiff, and we were just absolutely way too confident You know, the front of the French newspaper was painted black, and it said "The future is black" on it in French. That everyone thought we were going to, you know, destroy them, right? Anyway, so it's just 60,000 crying Kiwis walking around like they're in a daze in Cardiff. Most of them had flown in that day for the quarterfinals, and they've got like 2 weeks of rugby booked. We'd all bought tickets to the final. Anyways, TV3 fired me right there. They were like, "We're not going to need anyone anymore," obviously, and quite incredible. And John McDonald will probably be able to clarify this. I think TV3 had budgeted without understanding that the contracts meant that if we didn't make the semi-final, all the sponsors were out. So TV3 was just fucked, right? Completely fucked. I don't know how much of this I'm allowed to talk about. Anyways, so when we get the go off, I then go back to my hotel where like there's just TV3 people packing up all their shit to get out of there, whatever. And I call Greg. And I'm like, "Greg, now Amber's on a plane to fuck off." And he hung up.
Seriously?
And then in the conversation, he said, "You and your fucking mates and their haircuts," and they couldn't get, you know, the classic, whatever every Kiwi was thinking at the time. "You bloody spent less time on your hair and you bloody got your drop cut," whatever it is. Anyways. And so I eventually finally got him to agree, and then Amber turned up 2 days later and thought it was some big mistake or whatever, and then I proposed to her on the night of October the 8th, and she actually said yes, which was nice.
Nice. That wasn't even, I didn't even know that story existed.
No.
So why do NZRU hate you?
They at the time, so let's fast forward to 2011, when like 80% of incidents involving the All Blacks, I'm trying to think of. So we did a thing called the Thunderball. Do you know what a Thunderball was? Did you didn't see that? So it's like 10 Red Bulls stacked with straws then balanced on them, and then you balance Jaeger on the straws.
Oh yeah.
Then I put Bacardi 151 in your mouth, and then you dip your hand in 151. You light your hand on fire, and you blow a giant fireball, and melts the straws and drops the Jaegers into the thing. Don't try this at home. Do not try this at home. It's now illegal to do any fire tricks in bars.
Really?
And Pony, we kind of did it a lot longer than we should have done it.
So the backdraft in the Outback is over.
Yeah. Oh God, that was awful. That was the worst drink. My worst moment in a bar. No, that wasn't my worst. But the rest of them are at the Outback.
Yeah.
So yes, what we're talking about. Yes. So there were a lot of incidents. Richard Kahui, this is a true story, burned his hand on his debut. Burned his hand like really badly because he forgot his hand was on fire. But yeah, there's a lot of those stories from Pony. There's actually something on. Do you remember Tony Dunst, poker player?
Yeah, Australian guy. Yeah,
American guy, I think. But Tony, definitely American. Yeah, commentates for the World Series of Poker. He does the Thunderball, and then he's dribbling, flaming stuff, and then his tie catches on fire. It's on YouTube. Yeah, and then he has to take his shirt off his thing. It's great.
Yeah. Love that guy.
Sorry, DC was injured.
DC. So let's go back. Let's pull it right back. So you got 2003, DC. They don't win in 2003. He's just started there. 2007, he gets injured. He's not happy. They don't win there. So by 2011, he's primed, and of course we know he gets injured, and so I get a call from someone at the All Blacks, and they said, "Listen, we think it would be good. We've heard that you've been talking about an after party." They didn't plan anything. It's truly incredible. They hadn't thought about what the guys were going to do if they won or lost, right? Yeah. And so the guys were talking about going to 1885. I was like, if you win, it's going to be a nightmare. If you lose, it's going to be a nightmare. Let's do something private. And the All Blacks called and said, yeah, we think it's a good idea because DC needs something to distract him. He's, pretty bummed on this. And so he and I then managed to convince them to give us the top of the Hilton. It's an apartment that David Henderson owned. And they gave us this whole thing, and we built this really cool after party. And it's searchable too. There's some really cool footage of all the All Blacks. I'll tell you the coolest part of that. So everyone walks back from, we just had it was the worst rugby game to watch in history, right? We all agree. The 2011 game, it was just pure relief when we won. Yeah. And we're all walking back, and everyone's just kind of like, it's amazing. We get back. I get to the Hilton, and the first two people there are Justin Marshall and George Gregan. And Gregan, who has been someone that, growing up, I just did, he was that guy, was the biggest legend you'd ever met on the night. So he turned himself into a waiter. he realized how special it was for these guys. And so he had shot glasses. Everyone, when the boys came up the lift, the first thing they did was get a shot from George Gregan.
Wow. That's so
and he just, what a legend. And they were great. And so there's an awesome night there. I can't remember where the story started, but there was, does this eventually end up, we get kicked out 2 days later?
Does it?
Fuck, now some of the story gets a little bit. Yeah, I feel like if you're out there, you can ask me the end of that story. If you're out,
we've got the gist that it was a good night.
It was a good 3 days. It was a good 3-day event. It was really, really cool. I think that story started with Amber stopping me from going to the Christchurch parade, for the All Blacks. And the idea that it's always good to go skydiving, but make sure you've got a parachute. And my wife going, you're in no shape to go to the Christchurch parade 3 days or 2 days later or whatever it was.
Good call. Right, I'm going to pull you back into TV land.
Sorry. Jesus, sorry, guys. That was a 40-minute story.
No, it was
great. It's a great story.
I do want to take us to Access TV and then how it turns into Target, because I've got a lot of Target questions. But it was Access TV.
Access TV.
Sorry,
Access TV. Action Sports,
Yeah.
So I'd done a bit of TV presenting in the States when I got injured over there, a bit for ESPN, a bit for MTV and people like that. And which I got fired from too. There's an interest.
There's a theme.
So Kiwis, have you ever talked about the Kiwi accent?
I was talking about this with some of your YouTube stuff about how you almost have to Americanize yourself to fit in over there. He did it at college, right?
I did 4 years at college.
You also have to grow some problematic facial hair because I've seen his chin strap, and you were rocking kind of in a goatee situation.
It was like, I guess we weren't allowed to be all that creative in those days, so it was facial hair. I had some unbelievably bad hairstyles and bad facial, like the lamb chops.
Prison vagina.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I once did a show, like the end of my ESPN career was I did this show, a demonstration kind of show on a ramp, and they had Nicole Eggert. Do you guys remember her Baywatch?
Very much so.
She came and she was the guest, did bring guests along, whatever. And the top of a vert ramp is called a deck. And so for 15 minutes, I talked about how awesome it was to have Nicole Eggert up on the deck. And for 15 minutes, I could just see people like going, And I was like, I don't know what they're talking about. And so it was the last job I ever did for them. Fired.
And so Target, honestly, when we got you, the first thing that came to mind when we got in your pod, I was like, I can't wait to talk about the hidden cam stuff on Target. You must get it all the time. Is it the thing that people want to talk to you about the most?
Well, if someone like, if that in that era, we forget how insane that was. Someone decided that at 7:30, when families watching dinner, you'd watch a dude masturbate. Like, it just seems like a weird. So it's always it's kind of burnt into the brain of the nation, right?
There will be people listening that don't know. Can you explain?
Yeah, sure. So Target is a show, and on TV3 7:30. Like I said, it was probably the biggest show on TV3 at the time. And they'd go and find a trade, let's say like carpet cleaners, and they'd pick 4 carpet cleaners randomly.
Oh, my God.
And they'd set up a house. They would have bought the house. Incredible detail is that because of the technology at the time, instead of just having hidden cameras that you go and cut later, they would cut them live in the roof.
Yeah.
They had a whole team, vision switches. So they'd be like
an OB unit.
OB unit in the roof, in the ceiling, while the guy's masturbating downstairs. So for those of you that haven't seen it, every now and then, tradies, and you know who you are, tradies, every plumber's going to tell you it's the Sparkies. All the Sparkies are going to tell you it's the plumbers. Obviously, the most notorious one was the carpet cleaner, and he came in and he climaxed 3 times in 45 minutes.
I think Carly's wording in the voice was he finished. He finished in the underwear
them once, twice, 3, 4 times, and then finished in them,
and then put them back.
It's really amazing, and obviously the scariest thing is that since Target finished, it's just gone on unabated now. That guy, so there was a guy we caught twice. So it's completely random, and it was a completely different industry. But people that like to masturbate in your house will find a way unless Target's out there. So we probably need something.
Yeah, the
like
watchdog.
that.
So when something like that happens and there's people in the roof and this is happening live and the word gets back to you that this has happened and this is going to be on the show, is there a mixture? Like, it's funny, but at the same time, it's like someone's life's going to get destroyed, and it's a pretty fucking murky area.
Yeah, it's not what I signed up. So the first thing, it's not what I signed up for. It's actually not actually the part of the show that I was involved in, right? So I always signed up because I wanted to be on a show that helped the little guy against, you know, having challenges. I probably would have preferred to have been on Fair Go, but they would have touched me with a 10-foot pole. But I was really so there were people whose companies were made by Target. They get 10 out of 10. They're like, they're set. You know, they've got customers for the rest of their life. That's awesome. And there were people whose businesses were destroyed by a single employee who was, you know, and they had no idea. And so it was very hard for me. And I didn't want it. By the end of it, we just didn't want to do it anymore. In fact, after that episode, it basically killed the show because we were like, what are we even doing here? And everyone kind of clocked off and we were done. It was really interesting. It finished in kind of 2013. 2014, I did Cadbury Dream Factory, which was the next show that they had me on. And in that show, we people would write and we'd make their wishes come true. And the first or second show, I kind of surprised these guys in a garage, and they're pretty sure they're on target. They start to go to run. They start to run, and I'm like, no, it's Dream Factory.
But also, like, what have you done?
Yeah, I could just imagine. I told you, Terry. I told you to catch up with you one day.
Yeah, they're working. They're mechanics. They've done dodgy shit. Yeah.
Okay, love it. You are the Forrest Gump. There's so much here. I want to take us to Cure Kids and Red Nose Day, because we spoke at the start about being the connector of people. That was amazing. We just watched that this morning. It's so good. It's incredible. So good. But talk to us about how this all came together.
It's such a different moment in television history, from masturbating in the underwear to like, it's just peaks and troughs.
Yeah, and so this all comes, so 2010, I hit kind of rock bottom, right? I really am at rock bottom. I've now gone through this with Amber, and she's been big enough and amazing enough to kind of get me to a better place. And then 2011, Christchurch, so I'm going to go on a tangent here, but it's an important part about the journey. Christchurch happens, and where were you guys when?
This is the Christchurch earthquake.
Yeah, the big earthquake happened.
I was in the Emirates Lounge in Brisbane.
Is that right?
And I was in Auckland, Carrington Road.
Yeah. And so many of us felt so helpless, and it was, you know, incredibly. You just felt, it's helpless is the only way to describe it. And I'd been talking about a national telethon for ages. I like the idea of New Zealand kind of going back to that, like a national endeavour. And I've been trying to talk to the networks, and so I posted something on Facebook, said, surely this is time for like a network agnostic, across networks, telethon for Christchurch. And it went viral, like early days of virality, but went really viral. 100,000 kind of likes, comments, shares in the first few hours. And so 3 weeks it took us to put something together. And I had some amazing people help out. Strangely enough, Michelle Bogue, I know, politically I sit in a different spot to her, and I know she's had challenges, but Michelle was absolutely amazing. And a bunch of people got together, and we built Rise Up Christchurch for Christchurch, raised $2.8 million, and it was incredible. And it was cathartic for those of us that were feeling super helpless. And then for me, it completely and utterly, it was a revolution in my head about how you could feel if you started with an interesting idea. I was able to partner with these incredible people. You know, we had Mike McRoberts live from one of the first live broadcast from inside the red zone, and all these people that helped make it all happen. And then, of course, you get the people donating, which is amazing. You get the joy of the number, which is amazing when you're like, wow, that's going to be useful. And then you get to see it allocated and affect people. And that was incredible. And the year after, 2012, TV3 had said, listen, I feel like that was amazing. Could we do something? And we'd seen Comic Relief. The Comic Relief was amazing in the UK. And a brilliant, brilliant comedian, Jesse Griffin. I don't know if you're familiar with Jesse Griffin. Wilson Dixon is a character of his. He's on 7 Days. Yeah, it's great. Jesse and I just started talking, and John Wilde, who's another great producer, and Jesse's wife is Jackie Van Beck, you know. So, you know, very early on, and it was a couple of years since the Concords had finished, we were like, blue sky, what if we did, as a part of this Comedy for Cure Kids, you know, broadcast, a Flight of the Conchords sketch. And we're like, we're never going to pull this off. We had like a half day in Wellington to pull it off, to put it together. And then, maybe like another day for them to interview the kids. And I mean, they are just, genius is a word that it's absolutely not an overstatement. Sitting in a room and watching Reese and Brett and Jermaine jam is incredible. And in fact, in July 5th, I'm going to release a whole bunch of unreleased footage.
Really?
Like all the stuff, because we cut it down to like, whatever, a 14-minute piece. But there's like hours of them interviewing kids that's just laugh till you cry, hilarious. And yeah. So anyway, so they came up with this idea of interviewing the kids and then making a song. They didn't want it. They almost like about 11:30 at night when we're in the studio recording, they're like, wow, but I don't even know if this will go to air. I don't think we make it into a single or anything. And then by about 2 in the morning, we're like, this song is fucking good.
Yes.
It's amazing. Yeah. And so literally the next day after they finished it, we had the live broadcast, we slotted it in, and it was amazing. And it went viral. So again, we didn't release it. It just, people had taped it, threw it out, and they had 10 million views in a couple of hours. So
you had all of New Zealand singers, most famous and best singers on there. Is that easy once you tell them, "I'll fly the Concords are in"?
You would think so, actually. I always say there was some that shall remain nameless that said no. I think they'd regret it.
Oh, really?
I always love that, for whatever sins. Dave Dobbin always says yes. Peter Ehrlich, those guys are so great. To get to work with Dave Dobbin is like incredible. And I don't know if you saw the second one, team ball player thing.
Yeah.
With that.
Yeah.
Where we had Dave put on a Australian outfit at a Bledisloe Cup.
Yeah.
And he actually sang to Australian fans at a Bledisloe warm-up game, and they were totally confused. And we were like, they didn't understand that we were, using the curse of Dobbin.
Yeah. Will we ever see a return of that concept?
Yeah, so July 5th, I'm doing, this is airing after July 5th.
It'll probably now in conjunction with July 5th.
Yeah, I tell you what, why don't you do something, because it would be really cool. So if you do something.
It will be before July 5th.
Yeah.
If you do that, put it this way, if you do that and we can get people doing donations via your podcast for Cure Kids, if that happens, if you get over a certain amount, shall I give you guys the exclusive Concords footage to release?
What's the amount?
I don't know. Well, why don't we come up with the plan?
Hell yeah.
Talk to your
This
folks.
is the connecting.
Yeah.
This is the connecting live in person.
Yeah, all right. Let's do it.
It's actually, so this is the secret. So we are actually doing exactly what the secret is. The first thing is we got Cure Kids. Who can say no to Cure Kids? So I put that in there. You're going to look terrible if you say no. Secondly, you guys are the Concords, right? So you're very good at what you do. Over the last 5 years, you've become the best at what you do. And the core thing is we can have a little idea, but if I partner up with some people who are the best, it now becomes much easier for me to bring other people in. And, it's so, like you say, when you start with the Concords, and it gets much, much easier. I had this one, 2015, I have a bit of a challenge, right? So we've got the All Blacks, and we know that we're going to make the rugby song, the song for 2015, the official All Blacks song. And I know I've got Joel Little, at least because he feels obliged, and, he's amazing. And then I said to Taika, do you want to meet Joel Little? And I said to Joel, do you want to meet Taika? And I basically just got them both in the same cafe at the same time. I was like, okay, let's do this. Let's do this song. And of course, now they're obliged. And of course, it ended up being an awesome song. And eventually, because everyone else was doing it, we got Lord on there and Peter Jackson, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah, fucking awesome. Okay, so now we're going to talk about sort of current Brooke and the Futurist. And I want to know how is that a term you use, Futurist?
Yeah.
And what that means and how you kind of got into the space.
I've always been interested in what's happening, like why things are happening, what's changing and why it's happening, and whether that was early adopting in certain things. And so people will kind of like wind me up about rollerblading, which I think, it's such a moot point. If you don't like a sport or you don't want to do it, it's fine. I just, I feel like the 90s rollerblading bully was a meme that probably the world could have done without. I think a lot of people died as a result of that, by the way, making you feel bad. But yeah, so a lot of people died because they were either being called gay or rollerblading or vice versa. They probably took their lives. Yeah. Anyways, back to the joyous stuff. What were we talking about before I did that big guilt trip on everybody?
Futurist.
Oh, Futurist. Right. So early adopter, right? Rollerblading was because this new thing and I wanted to try it out. And so and the internet and web design. And so as I've gone through these things, as there's something new, I'll give it a try and try it out. And not that long ago, I met an incredible group of people that were just super smart. Aaron McDonald is a co-founder with me at Non-Fungible Labs, and now he's the co-founder and CEO of Futurist, and is just the smartest person in this space on the planet, along with his brothers, I should point out, or they'll get angry. But for the most part, I met Aaron, and I could suddenly see that we were heading towards a much bigger transition than we'd ever been in before. In the kind of turn of 2020 up to 2023 was a transition out of the information era. This is basically the internet being the biggest thing, and the collision of 5 really significant technologies. So artificial intelligence, extended reality, the Internet of Things, hyperconnectivity. And when I said 5, I knew I was going to have 5.
I know I had 4.
Internet of Things, hyperconnectivity. Anyways, 4. Really? No, there was the 5th one. I've just forgotten it. But those technologies, where you could say, those technologies, there's been a whole bunch of work done on them in the past, but it's now layering up, and they're all kind of colliding. And we entered the exponential age last year in March. And it's noticeable that technology is now moving at a rate that's almost untrackable. So, so I've really enjoyed learning about it. I love learning about it, but I'm really passionate about making sure that an entire generation or few generations of Kiwis understand what's happening so that we can prepare ourselves.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I think majority of our audience will be interested in this, but some of it can get confusing.
Yes.
Right? And I've heard you described as someone who's very good at sort of articulating these quite sometimes complicated concepts. So I want to start with, what is a fluff world?
Because I think I know what that is.
Yeah. You think it's just above Pony Club, and you have to pay $45 an hour. So early on, so we talked about communities and content. And We Are Tenzing is a company that I started in 2016 that manages a lot of New Zealand's top content creators. They're purposeful people, the How to Dads and Jess Quinns and yada, yada, all of these people. And so Aaron McDonald and I started talking about content and what's going to happen to it in the future. And we've always talked about the idea of proper attribution. If you make content that then kind of flies all over the world, when the Concords went viral, this was a specific example we had. For the first 2 days, we weren't able to get any money for Cure Kids because it had just been taped, uploaded, and was just, firing off around the world. Well, we've always dreamed about having accurate attribution. The idea that this creator gets money every time everyone enjoys it, right? And halfway through this conversation, Aaron had bought into We Are Tenzing and I'd bought into Centrality, his group of 60-odd blockchain-based high-tech companies, really high-tech.
Blockchain,
yep, right.
We'll come back to that because I've got a glossary of things I don't understand.
Yeah. Well, and Aaron had been building this for a while. He'd raised a lot of money and he's a very smart guy. And then I get a call from him one day and he says, you need to look into NFTs. This sounds like what we've been talking about, the ability to effectively track content. And for all of the kind of the veneer of what people think NFTs are in terms of like a picture, expensive picture, the real base is that they are contract and content combined. So the ability for you to wrap a contract around content so that everywhere it goes, people know exactly who made it, when they made it, and some of the core details around it, right? Including potentially the ability to monetize it.
So what happened in the NFT space? Because I remember that there's a whole lot of hype about it in New Zealand rugby, and everyone was getting on board, and it seemed like it hit this big top, and then it sort of crashed. Where is it now?
Yeah, so I mean, the technology, the way I explain it is, so we know that we're heading into this quite complex world. If you've seen Ready Player One, the movie.
I have not.
No, you have not? You have?
Yep.
We're gonna be in this really complex world in the future where there's a whole bunch of interoperability. And NFTs are the equivalent of a PDF. So not the actual equivalent, but in 1992, if you had a Mac and you had a PC, you wouldn't have been able to send files to each other. You can't, it was just impossible. And portable document format was invented and you could start send files to each other, right? That interoperability actually, which we don't think anything of nowadays, is really important. So it's not like the problem with NFTs wasn't NFTs. They're a technology that will allow for interoperability of content. The problem was that people started speculating on which NFT they would have as their identity. Yeah. So we are incredibly tribal. We are speculative, and there's a whole bunch of showing your identity digitally that exists now that has never really existed before. So for my parents, it was so weird that someone would change their, avatar to a rabbit that they had paid $5,000 for. But for people that are deep into a community, having that avatar says I had $5,000 to spend, or I was really early into this culture, and both of those are pluses, right? Either I'm rich enough, I'm early enough to be in it, or I'm rich enough to buy it off of someone else, right? Yeah. And in today's internet culture, displaying your identity digitally is going to become more and more important. The speculation was significant, and if we backtrack, at the end of 2020, when Aaron and I had the call, we think NFTs are going to be an interesting way for content and contracts and payments to collide. We built Non-Fungible Labs, and I brought two. I bought first an Alex Smaler, brilliant guy. You guys have met Brad.
Yes. Brad Smaler. Oh, yeah, incredible story. Yeah.
Brad's brother. I was already working with Brad quite a lot, and I'd done the fundraiser for Brad after his accident, and met Alex at Pony Club and there. And when Alex came back, he was looking for a job, and I said, "Have you heard of NFTs?" He was like, "Yeah." And it was surprising he had. It was really early. And so he brought in his friend Jesse Metcalf, who's a brilliant artist and was studying a master's in artificial intelligence and art in Berlin via correspondence at the time. And the two of them created Fluff World under our banner. And I said it was the worst business plan I'd ever seen. They were like, so day one, we make $4 million. I'm like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? Day one, you make $4 million. And they'd seen some of what was happening, but no one could have predicted, what was going to happen. I was like we were moving house, I was clearing rubbish into a truck that we'd rented. And when we went to go on sale on Fluff World, I thought we've got a day or so, right, to buy one of these rabbits. And 40 minutes they were sold out. And with the first week they did $40 million. So, and wow. It was incredible. The sales, it was the largest at its time, the largest kind of digital asset sale event in history. And it was because there was a lot of people speculating in around how this identity was how identities were going to work and trying to make money.
One of the conversations I had with Jay a few weeks ago was get Brooke talking about some of the cool shit that's coming down the pipeline. Oh, yeah. Like Futurist hat on. What is ahead of us that we will be seeing in 1 to 5 years' time?
I mean, it's really amazing. So Non-Fungible Labs has led to me now being a stakeholder. Aaron rolled 11 of these incredible companies up into something called Futurist. It's based just up the road here near K Road. It's got an NVIDIA H100, the most powerful supercomputer in New Zealand, in a literal car park that looks out onto the southern motorway. I probably shouldn't say where it is, by the way. But anyways, it's got a couple of 250 people around the world, 17 different time zones. Now building incredible stuff for people like FIFA and Reebok. I was about to say someone that has not been announced. Don't say that. But some incredible projects they're doing with global brands. And so if you go to like Reebok Impact on Instagram now, have you guys done this yet?
No.
So you just DM them and it will create you. You upload a photo into your DMs. So you DM it. It then prompts you. You upload a photo. It will then create a digital sneaker inspired by your photo, like a brand new Reebok, fully digital, perfect details that you can make physically as well. Yeah. But you can buy that sneaker for $8 and you can wear that in Fortnite and Roblox and on a bunch of other game stuff that we have as well. And so in that you're on social media, you're creating a blockchain asset, a digital asset that you can, that you can add value to, that you can on-sell eventually. You're using generative AI. It's just such an incredible process. And again, Kiwi company doing amazing things on a global scale.
And where are we at with like voice and video stuff?
We're in so much trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so interesting. This morning, so I had the keynote that I had to blow you guys off for. And I kind of just, I demonstrated, in January 2023, there's some Will Smith footage of him eating pasta. It's the AI generated. It's disaster. It looks quirky and funny, but it doesn't look like Will Smith eating pasta. And 14 months later, you can make the difference is incredible. And back then we thought, okay, TV and movies are going to be safe for a while because we can generate images, but moving images is too hard. Well, 14 months later, 15 months later, you could not tell if you're generating someone eating pasta. Or you've seen Sora. Have you seen Sora?
No.
Do you guys? Can you put clips in?
Yeah.
Put Sora and it will blow people's minds. And so when I'm talking to production companies and networks at the moment, I do a bunch of consulting and where I go on and say, hey, here's where we think, and we've got some great AI PhDs at Being AI, which is where I work doing the consulting. And we'll sit down with people and say, here's where we think your industry might go in the next 3 years. With TV and film, we need to get people ready for by end of 2026, maybe mid 2026. Anyone on Earth with the right amount of compute connectivity will be able to make a half-hour episode of by command, maybe even live, maybe even discussing it, right? So you can literally, you don't like the last episode of Game of Thrones, you will be able to remake that entire episide.
Incredible.
That's crazy, yeah. That'll be the end of our podcast.
Yeah, what do you see for the podcast space? Where do you see it going?
Well, I think there will be a strong delineation between artificial content and real content. I mean, they just behave really differently already. And I feel like
I'm having a wild deja vu moment right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's a glitch in the Matrix, bro.
You okay, man?
Yeah, carry on though. Yeah. This is wild.
Yeah. So like I don't think that people are going to be. I think everything's going to change. The example I give is kind of the transport revolution, and I give this because I've stolen it from my good friend David McDonald. 1903. You can look at a photo of New York and it's kind of like just empty. The streets are empty, 1 or 2 horse carriages, whatever. By 1913, it's just wall-to-wall multi-Fords, right? 1904, Henry Ford invents mass production, and the transportation industry destroyed so many equine industries, whether it's like whatever, I don't know any horse jobs. Shoe people.
I was going to say fluffer, but then no. It's just top of mind.
Wow, wait.
It's just top of mind.
Holy shit.
It's just top of mind.
Wow.
Croupier?
There were. I should know these.
Yeah.
But, there were a lot of these like niche industries that
blacksmith.
Blacksmith. But it destroyed jobs and it created whole new massive industries. And it actually led to significant growth. And there isn't an industry now on the planet you can think of that would exist in the way it does without the transport revolution happening. So I feel like we need to be aware that that's the space we're in right now. We can't imagine the jobs that are going to come down the pathway. The pipeline might have a different type of podcasting that's every single thing we've said today in conversation might be rendering in real time and relevant and contextual for the person that's listening to it, right? So maybe where the prompt is, right? We're having this podcast, and instead of, so initially, transitionally, you guys will be able to take your podcast. It's already happening, by the way. You've seen it. It'll just pull in the footage. You know about this?
Yep.
So it'll pull in relevant footage, and that's going to get better and better. But it might be contextual. So if you've got a guy listening to this in South India, it might be that the content is more relevant for them. So they're seeing content that's, culturally relevant.
You kind of made the probably a joke. I sort of said, what's happening with video and audio down the line. You're saying we're fucked. But when you do look to the future, is there a fear, or is there excitement, or is there a mix of both?
There's all of that. So I think the more you learn about AI, the more excited you'll be and the less fearful you'll be, because it's less unknown. That's the first thing. Right now, the biggest challenge we have is that it's incredibly unknown, even for the experts. But for most people, they're just kind of burying their head in the sands a little bit, right? I remember 5 years ago, before neural networks and transformers, etc., with these new models, and we all thought it was going to be truck drivers that were going to be without a job, right? And which is fine, because it's not going to affect us all that much, and our stuff's going to get here. Well, it turns out probably not the truck drivers. It's definitely middle management, call centers. It's everybody will be affected by this, and we need to be aware of what that means.
So what can the everyday person do to kind of prep themselves for that?
Just learn. I mean, it's such a cliche, but again, you're not going to be replaced by AI, but you're going to be replaced by someone using AI that understands AI.
As an example from us of how we're using it, we've got this app, and so in our prep for, I talk to Amber, and I record the call on my phone, and then I push a button, and then it downloads it, and it transcribes it, and it spits it into ChatGPT, and then I can say, give me 10 bullet points of what she said, And so then in 2 minutes is done what previously might have taken us an hour.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I'll give you David McDonald's insight that I'll try to make this short. So at the moment we have these, when we think about what's going to happen next, and we have these meeting apps, they're productivity apps, right? And so you download one Otter or one of your things for your meetings, and you might have Uber, which is using AI that helps you get places, et cetera, et cetera. Coming down the line now, we'll have these personal AI assistants that will supersede all of them. You will not need to log into anything. Just have a personal AI assistant that knows that you're talking to Amber, knows that you've got an interview with me in 2 weeks. It'll transcribe that, it'll build the action points. It'll take on some of the action points itself, deal with them if they're below your pay grade. It'll only prompt you when it needs your advice on something. So, for the most part, we think that the biggest transformation will be digital twins, personalized digital twins and assistants that will drive everything.
Oh, that excites me. Yeah. That's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so terrifies me thinking about two of him.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to release this on the week leading into CreatorCon.
I love it.
So tell us about what it is. Tell us about the creator community in New Zealand, where we're at, and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, so that's the one I forgot. In our exponential age, let's just edit it. Number 5, creator economy. So creator economy, and a couple of years ago there was all this influencers, this and that. Well, the truth is, influencers are a subset of a much larger movement. We've removed gatekeepers. There were gatekeepers in communications and entertainment for reasons, right? Technology was expensive, and broadcasting was expensive, and so when those two things kind of disappeared, it was inevitable that if enough TV networks turn you guys down for your show, you just go, well, fuck it, we're going to build it ourselves, right? So this particular, fuck it, I'm going to build it myself moment is incredibly empowering. It means that, when we look at CreatorCon now, we have 700 creators that have signed up. No advertising, basically word of mouth, that have signed up for this. There are thousands of Kiwis right now that are making content about things they're passionate about, sometimes niche and obscure, sometimes general. Almost always they have a passion and a purpose in there, which is wonderful. So the level of local content that's being made is significant. We just don't really know about it because unless you follow said creator in Taranaki that's into, organic farming, you don't even know they exist, right? And so we still got like hundreds of millions of dollars going into traditional advertising. And I don't begrudge that because there are a whole bunch of people that work at those TV networks and in those traditional media entities. But the truth is, if they're passionate about making content, they should be out there making content as well. You know, you just don't need to broadcast TV2 on broadcast anymore. No one has an aerial.
Yeah.
It's done.
What's your advice for content creators?
I mean, I think, well, okay, I'd like to hear, what would you guys have done it. What's your advice?
Be consistent. Just keep going. Start and don't stop. You'll get better, and just keep going. Get really good at what it is you do, and it will build. If it's good, it will get shared. Yeah,
so I think you break that into two parts, which is start and continue, right?
Yeah.
But the start is the big one. And it's really interesting. We saw COVID, which was, you know, probably the first global experiment with universal basic income, even though no one called it that, right? You basically said to everyone, okay, you've got a couple of months, sort it out yourself, do what you want to do. And people were like, you know, and I've always wanted to talk about gardening. And so we had a lot of creators that joined at that point in time. And because there was a low friction area for starting. But for some people out there, it's like, well, can I do this and have my job? Yes, it's a great side hustle for you to do. I think the platforms are making it easier and easier. We live in a world where in Western technology, we still have a big disconnect between payment and content. You know, in China, I don't know if you've been to China or Southeast Asia where WeChat, et cetera, it's just a single ecosystem. So it's really easy. You could do your podcast and people would be able to pay you very easily for it, as opposed to going through the hoops that they have to now, right? And so that'll improve. TikTok Shop is on its way. Instagram will improve its shopping features. Podcasting is getting bigger and bigger. Yeah.
How is your gardening content going?
I love gardening. I don't. So I'm a hypocrite. I don't make content. I wish I did. I wish I'd started and hadn't stopped. I'd like to be a content creator, but I'm just so bad at doing it. But I do. You know about the gardening.
Yes.
You've researched it. You know, I was the vice president of the Palm and Psychad Society.
I think more people need to learn about this side of Brooke Howard-Smith.
If you want, and this was a bit of a grift because I love palms and cycads and I just wanted to get them cheaper and it worked out really well. Although I ended up spending a lot of money on them through the society. I kept those fuckers afloat for a long time.
I said at the start, like, your life is made for long form podcasts. Like, all of these areas we've just scratched the surface on, but fuck, it's been good. Before I start wrapping us up, are there any bits and pieces you wanted to get to?
Oh, I got more than I even anticipated.
You got to talk about bestiality, which is where you wanted to go with this.
Did I?
Yeah, I think you said horse fluffer.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, you did. Yeah, you're right, I did. No, a couple of lures in the water and like hooked some fish that I didn't even know existed. So that was awesome. Are you going to finish on the surface area?
Yeah, I'm going to finish with what Jay said. And he said that you coined the phrase, increase your surface area for success.
Fucking hell, mate. That might have been really late night. Has he explained what that means?
No, we'd love you to.
Fuck, I wonder if I even said that. I might have said something like, oh no, I'm not going to say that. Increase your surface area. I mean, I would suggest he's talking about that sense of trying lots of things. So maybe that's like, isn't that funny though? It's really interesting. Often I'll have these really vivid memories of a moment with someone. And for them, it probably wasn't this giant moment, but for me, it happened to resonate. So, I mean, obviously Jay is incredibly successful. And one of the interesting things is people see pals and go, oh, you know, overnight success. Well, you know, Jay has been hustling since day one and tried all these different things. And I think that's something we share in common, right? So, yeah, we talk about the 15 successful companies. There's probably been another 15 that haven't been successful, right?
And is the key to that success having those good people around you?
Well, we go to start and then continue until it's obviously not going to be good. Always finding people that are incredible at what they like. So if I was going to, you know, do a podcast fundraiser on Friday, the 5th of July. You guys are the guys that I would come to. And what we'd probably do if we're going to do that is like a live from the Pullman between two beers live, which would be great. Have you ever done that?
Never. Not yet.
Would you ever do that?
On Friday, 5th of July.
We were just looking for the right platform to do it. Yeah.
Because I think if we do that, then we can put the Concord's content in there. Are you guys okay on TikTok?
Yeah.
How do you mean? Are you guys okay on TikTok?
As in, you got a good size audience?
25,000.
Let's make that 100,000. I'm going to set you a target. We're going to try to get you 100,000 followers on Friday, the 5th of July. We'll build it up. But you know what I'm saying is, if you start with great people, it's easier. And often, it's easier now for me because obviously I've got context and people they're familiar with me, so it's easier to convince someone. And I've got history of pulling stuff off. You only get that history from trying stuff and failing and succeeding, right? So that's that sense of, again, just frequency, which I think is what Jay said, increases surface area.
Yeah.
I feel like we need to get you saying that target again very clearly so that we can then use that in our social media.
You mean as in what we're going to do?
Yeah.
So if you're just joining us, I've managed to, over the course of 90 minutes, convince the boys to do their very first ever live Between Two Beers. Between Two Beers live, we always knew it was going to come, right?
Yeah.
Stage show, the movie. And we're on our journey, but what we'll do, and I'll see if we can't get a couple of people from the amazing Cure Kids history, all of those people that contributed musically or comedically, to join you guys to talk about it. That is so cool.
That's so hot.
That's so really cool. And we're not even drinking, so it's obviously a cool.
Yeah, we might need to go have a few.
Yeah.
Fucking love it, man. This has been such a cool ep. The other thing he said is Brooke Howard-Smith is the tipping point. And
had you guys been drinking at this point in time?
Yeah, we had it. No, thank you so much for coming in and sharing part of your story. I really encourage you to tell it more because it's so rich and to understand, some of the adversity you've been through as well, and some of the hard times, and to sort of shape it all into the stuff you're doing now is just so cool. So,
yeah. The self-reflection and awareness of the douchebag, in your words, that you were, but to be comfortable around acknowledging that. I think that's...
Yeah, I think it's okay if I say douchebag.
Yeah. No, I think it's really good that you're empowering others to call you that, because we were all doing it behind your back through the 2000s. And
too close to the bone, too close to the bone. No, it's awesome. It's awesome. Oh, and sorry, we need to wrap up as well. This is for Cure Kids, Red Nose Day. Cure Kids funds research into curing life-threatening illnesses in children. And so if you don't show up on July 5th, you're kind of on the life-threatening diseases side of the equation. You're supporting them as opposed to supporting us. So that's perfect.
Love it.
Brilliant.
How good. All right. Thanks so much, Brooke.
Do we do high fives at the end?
And we hug.
Oh, that's awesome. Let's do that.